Hey guys, welcome to the Reverie podcast. I'm here with Michael D'Angelo. Michael is a Timothy Roberts Cymbals artist. It's very, very new, me having artists. It's a topic I'm sure we could discuss if that's interesting to you. But Michael's an incredibly accomplished drummer. I first saw you when you were literally a kid at a drum festival playing a ripping solo. And I think it was in college actually, because I used to go to drummerworld.com and
Oh
scout.
yeah,
I think you had like a profile on drummerworld.com.
I did.
I was like 18, 19, like this 11-year-old kid is like better than I'll ever be. So that was my first interaction with you. Now fast forward, we're working together. So thank you for
Yep.
being on. It's good to talk to you.
Of course, Tim. Thanks for having me, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. So we have been so this is not new. Us working together is not new. You
Yep.
have like one of the very first cymbals I ever made
That's true.
that I ever put the Timothy Roberts stamp on when I launched my company. And you still have that? You still play it?
I do. Funny enough, you mention it. It's
that
right here.
Nice.
Yeah, I knew we were going to talk about this, so I made sure
cool.
to have it. But yeah, it's there it is for those of you that are following the video. When you were still sharpieing things,
Yes.
and the O has been worn off by the felt, so it just says original.
Original.
But yeah, I actually remember this day quite vividly because you were modifying cymbals for a long time, and I had purchased a cymbal used and it came damaged in shipment. I think there was like a big dent on the edge, and I had heard of your work before, and we're both from North Carolina, so I had obviously heard you're playing, and but I knew that you were making cymbals, and so I contacted you. I was like, hey, can I just come up and you fix the cymbal? And I remember we just got to chatting, and then you said, hey, I'm working on these, do you want to check them out? And then you started putting up your originals, and I think if I remember correctly, at the end I said, can I buy this? Can I take it home? And then you were like, can you let me hold on to it so I can make more of them?
Yes.
It's like, yeah. I think you were still figuring out like what your style was and what kind of things that you were trying to make. And so, yeah, I was like, please hold on to it. And I think this cymbal became your half flats, I believe.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a 20 and a half kind of half flat. And to be honest, it is my most complimented cymbal.
Wow.
Yeah, I get more compliments on that particular cymbal than any other cymbal I've ever owned, mainly because, it has kind of all those things about like that stick definition of a flat ride, but also it has the overtones and a bell sound and the crashability. And so, yeah, that is still my left side at the moment. Yeah.
I found myself kind of rolling back around on some of my earliest stuff because it's like you develop and then you tend to look back on when you were ignorant or just you didn't have when I didn't have the technique, I was figuring it out. There's some kind of magic that can come along. Maybe it's like beginner's luck or whatever. It's like you're just in total explore mode. And I remember that one in particular was one of the ones, if not the one, that I was like, oh, if I could make all my cymbals had to have this level of quality, I'd be happy.
Yeah.
There was a lot of duds too, but
yeah. Well, I'm happy to have this one for sure. Yeah. It's a special one. Yeah.
Yeah. So give me a little insight into your background and tell me like, what are you? This doesn't have to be cymbal specific, but what is your what would you say your aesthetic is and like the kind of music you pursue? What do you want to sound like? What do you feel like encapsulates you as an artist?
Yeah, that's a good question. So you mentioned background, and I started playing when I was about 3 years old, to be honest.
Whoa.
And that's only because my father's a drummer. He's a great country western drummer, completely self-taught, and did some touring, did a bunch of playing. And what's funny about that relationship is he never tried to force it on me, and he never tried to teach me anything. He just noticed that I was super into it at an early age and just was like, just go. One interesting fun fact about him was he's a true lefty. So everything's reversed, kind of like Colin Stranahan, Phil Collins, those kind of drummers.
Yeah.
So when I first started playing, I was playing reversed. And then I remember watching I was obsessed with drum VHS tapes at the time. And I remember, I think I wore out the Dave Weckl ones and the Dennis Chambers, and I would always ask why they were reversed because they were playing right-handed.
Yeah, right.
So, but yeah, I remember my dad had, what did he have? He had like 70s A's. That's what he had. And he had like a 22 kind of medium ride and a 20-inch, like kind of medium thin, and like 16, 17, 18-inch crashes. And sadly, I cracked most of them because I didn't have good technique. Unfortunately, I still have the 16. It's in my bag over there. But yeah, but as I started to get more and more comfortable with playing, and then I started taking it more seriously, I studied with a great teacher in Charlotte named Rick Dior. Mm-hmm. And for those of you that are familiar with Rick, he has a great cymbal collection. Pretty much has everything you would ever want. I mean, he's got old K's, he's got old A's, he's got just everything. But he always encouraged me to be versatile, and versatility was a core tenet of his teaching. And so I've always thought about my sound as like a balance between kind of doing different musical situations, whether it is straight ahead acoustic jazz, or maybe more pop rock, or maybe electronic, hip hop, drum and bass, kind of that kind of stuff. So kind of figuring out what are the appropriate sounds for those kinds of music, but then also kind of put my own personality in them. And so I've always been drawn to obviously very dark, complex sounds. We always talk about our favorite drummers and our favorite cymbal sounds. And, Bill Stewart is a, top 5 for me, when it comes to cymbal sounds. And, but I also I like the whole range of spectrums too. I over the years, I've gone from being like really picky about it to being more open and just seeing like what works best for each musical situation. So, probably 10 years ago, you probably wouldn't even have caught me playing anything heavier than like 2,200 grams on a 22. Wow. But now I'm more open to I know that you recently did the Sound Creation Dark Ride kind of redux and that kind of heavier sound. And now I could totally see myself playing that kind of sound if the music calls for it. And of course, as I, am building my career and still evolving, doing kind of different things, I was fortunate enough to tour a few years with a project called Celebrating Billy Joel, which that was like trying to do the Liberty DeVito thing. So I'm just playing like rock at that point. And that was, to be honest, that was a challenge to figure out like, oh, maybe my jazz sensibilities don't really work in this context, because I hit a really thin crash and it just doesn't do anything. So I'm like, oh, I need some heavier cymbals for this gig. And so I remember the first year of doing that show, I was constantly swapping out sounds. And then I eventually kind of settled on what would work. So, and I'm also a generally delicate, more gentle player. So I like cymbals that kind of respond really fast because I don't hit them super hard. And so that's also a part of my sound, is trying to get that balance of like something that projects but also can respond really quickly. You know?
I always felt like watching you play is like watching someone using the least amount of effort possible to get the sound out. Which like watching someone who's like it's almost like water. It's like fluid in this way. There's not like unnecessary effort being expelled to achieve.
I appreciate that. I hear that a lot, and that's just I guess a product of just how I've always approached the instrument, of just trying to be as relaxed and effortless as possible. It's funny, like there are a lot of times I think I'm like really going for it and wailing, and then somebody will take a video of it and then I'll watch it and it'll just don't look like anything.
It's like doing this.
But that was something I can very much attribute to Rick. Was he like from the ground up, it was always being loose, being very relaxed, letting the stick do the work. Always approaching it from a relaxed point of view, because we we play a very physical instrument. It's
Yeah.
we can, it can lead to physical problems, hand problems, and knock on wood, I've never had any of those issues, but I guess it's just because of that approach over
Yeah.
the years, is not trying to force it and just kind of let it be what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a kind of a vulnerability in that approach as well. Cause like I find, at least in my own playing, there's times where I find myself tensing and kind of trying to force the sound to be a certain way. And
Mm-hmm.
but there is a vulnerability in like letting your stick fall and trusting yourself that the time's going to be where you want it to be. The feel is going to be there, and you're not going to be expending that extra kind of, that extra tension in your body,
Yeah. And what's funny? There are two funny stories about that. Is one, I was actually self-conscious about that for a long time, because I would see and listen to some of my favorite drummers, like Elvin or Tony or like Jeff Tane Watts or Justin Faulkner, and I just noticed how much power they have behind the instrument. And in some ways, I wanted to emulate that. And then I would always have these gigs where someone would come up to me in the band afterwards and just be like, "Oh man, I just appreciate how quiet you play," or you're really sensitive to the other members of the band, because there are times where drums are loud, they're loud instruments. So, essentially people would tell me they felt more comfortable because
Mm.
they didn't have to play so hard. And then I was like, oh, maybe I should just really lean into it a
Yeah.
little bit more, just make that my own. you know we're always searching for like our individuality, our unique approach to the instrument. And I guess that was just kind of the sign that, like, yeah, that's my thing, and I should lean into that, and
Yeah.
I shouldn't shy away from that. And then the other thing was actually playing that rock gig was having to kind of play louder and not and figure out how to approach that from a more relaxed standpoint, because it's so easy, especially when you're coming up really hard for a backbeat, to kind of clench right before you hit the snare drum. It actually felt in some nights I'd come off stage and I'd be like, oh,
Like, oh yeah.
there it is. And then it's funny, approaching that gig where I had to play louder actually forced me to be more relaxed than I was. And yeah, some sticks get dropped, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Just reach for another one.
Right. That's
But
awesome.
that's kind of how I've always approached it. And I think we talk, we chat all the time about cymbals, and I think cymbal sounds and that, how you play them very much is individual, and the sound of the cymbal is directly correlated to your approach and your touch and your stick and where you want to play on the cymbal. I mean, it's just all those things. I think you did a video recently about recording cymbals and how it's just impossible to really know until you play in person,
Right.
just because everyone has a different approach and a different way they like to play the instrument. We Bill Stewart click,
All right. Right.
that thing.
We
Yeah,
saw
that's how I think about it.
we saw Bill together in Durham.
We did. We had a date.
Yep, we did a drummer date, and we got up on the stage, and Bill let us, like, I think he let us tap on the cymbals maybe, or like at least hold them. And that was one of those moments where I was kind of evolving to, I guess, more so like expanding my palette and not just making these really thin, dark, washy, complex cymbals. And then it was just like surprising to hear Bill in person and to hear those cymbals in person and be like, oh, these are actually heavier than they sound on the records. And the sound, it is that dark, gritty, complex thing, but that's how it sounds translated. Like behind it, it's a different animal. And it's
100%.
It's kind of an animal, actually. It's like really, it's sort of like difficult. You're like, oh, I don't know about this kind of sound. I owned one of those dry complexes years ago and had to sell it because I could not play it the way I play.
Yep. I have the exact same experience. I had two of them. They were both Gen 1s, a thin and a medium thin. And the medium thin was actually owned by Peter Erskine for a while. And I loved those. It's funny, but only Bill could really play them. because I would play it on gigs and just be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." It's just so like
Yeah.
so like abrasive sounding, and
Yeah.
and yeah, the thin was I think 1996 grams or something. It was
Wow.
so thin. And I actually liked that one better out of the two. But yeah, I realized I was like, the kind of music that Bill plays, like when he plays with Sco and he plays with Larry Goldings and Peter, and that sound makes sense for that particular musical situation. Because
Yes.
that's a louder, B3 is a loud instrument, and electric guitar, and so it makes total sense. And then I remember that night, because then you started going down the rabbit hole of heavier cymbals. And then in some ways, heavier cymbals are actually quieter
Yeah.
than thinner cymbals. That has always stuck with me, because I think many drummers, we always have this conception that thinner cymbals are softer and thinner cymbals are better for quieter gigs. But in some ways, it's the opposite, which
Yeah.
I find so fascinating now. And yeah, and then there was a cymbal you made for me recently that's like 2,500 grams, and I would have never even considered that weight. But now I'm just like, I get it.
Yeah.
It makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And then that cymbal has a lot of room to breathe, as opposed to the really thin ones where you just touch it and that's basically it.
Yeah.
You can overplay
Hit
them
that
really
volume
easily.
threshold really fast, that maximum
Mhm.
volume threshold at like a real low dynamic, and it doesn't really give you much room to build on top of it. And it's a control thing. Like I think thin cymbals are actually just vastly harder to play in a sense.
Mhm.
Um, Especially if you want to control it and then have a dynamic range with your playing, be able to play soft and grow to really make those kinds of bigger musical statements.
Mhm.
That's much tougher with, and it goes to show when you look at what the major manufacturers actually produce and sell, it's just a whole weight class higher. The thins are like a medium from me. The thins are not really all that thin. Uh,
Yeah.
and that makes sense if you're selling to the general public. It's going to be an easier cymbal to play, even though it's heavier. But yeah, the whole world of cymbals is kind of wild right now. It feels like it feels like the bigger companies are becoming more aware of this kind of indie movement, and also
Mhm.
just the desire for drummers to get a darker sound. I mean, that's been going on for decades, obviously, because of the K Istanbul factory, and
Sure.
everything does kind of point back there. But uh, now more so than ever, we have more makers, more options, more voices out there making the instrument. And yeah,
Yeah.
I do keep coming back to the place of like finding some kind of middle ground between what you prefer as a player and then what will actually do the job on the gig, and try to find a marriage point with those two things, which means maybe a little bit
Yeah.
of sacrifice on what you would prefer to hear.
Yeah.
You know,
100%. Yeah, there's, one tune that I changed recently was, and I think it also has to do with like the trends in music and how
Mhm.
things evolve. I remember probably maybe around 15 years ago at this point was the trend of really thin, dark, trashy cymbals. And this is my opinion, or my kind of my own conspiracy about it, but it was seemingly coinciding with the social media movement, where a lot of people are recording content for Instagram instead of maybe playing gigs. That sounds worse than it is. But essentially, like I purchased a couple of these cymbals from some of these manufacturers. And I just remember getting on the gigs and just being like, oh my gosh, these cymbals don't project at all.
Yeah.
And if I'm playing in a big band and I need the saxophonist on the other end of the band to be able to hear my ride cymbal pattern, a 2,100 gram 22 is just not going to be able to cut at
Yeah.
all. And I remember, yeah, I played a few gigs and immediately sold those cymbals, because I
Yeah.
was just like, I just need something that will, and kind of like you said, you're sitting behind it and it sounds one way. but then you actually get out into the audience, and then it has like a totally different sound, a totally different, maybe the wash doesn't carry as much. It sounds really washy behind the kit, but then you get
Yeah.
out in front, I'm actually really curious. In a few weeks, I'm going to New York, and I know that Good Hands has Al Foster's sound creation.
Yeah.
And a few of my friends have gone to the shop and have played it, and, just sending messages back and forth. And they're like, yeah, you got to play it.
Yeah.
Because when you play it, you're going to be like, what? Like,
Yeah.
it's so heavy and so like, but you listen to all those, and I've actually seen that cymbal live. I saw Al at Birdland maybe like 16, 17 years ago. And I just remember like thinking, wow, that's a really interesting cymbal, but I never would have thought it was like 3,300 grams heavy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just, the way that the cymbal projects in the room and the way it interacts. And so, I think I'm glad to see that tide's kind of shifting a little bit into, we're now thinking more about how those cymbals function in a musical situation versus just, does it sound good by itself?
Yeah, totally. And hopefully we're kind of growing into a more holistic approach. Like as a drumming community, we're growing into this sense that like that there's a use. Like I listen to Paul Motion and Al and Jack and playing that cymbal, and there's something about that kind of sound that is like wonderful to listen to in the music, and the way it's 3,300 gram cymbal, 22-inch cymbal, how that carries the band and where it sits in the music. It's just like, and there's nothing like a cymbal that's under 2,800 grams can't touch it. It can't that kind of voice that kind of cymbal can have. And I got my hands through doing that project. I got my hands on one of the early model Dark Rides, like the 602 version, which is, I believe, what they have at Good Hands. And I think it's almost the same weight as Al's. So if you're, so when next time you're in North Carolina and come to the shop, like you can also play one that's probably almost, almost identical. That model at least was really close. Like each model was pretty close in sound. And when I play it, I'm just like, I'm waiting for the chance to have a gig come up that I can use it on. But it is a specific sound. So, it's like, and where I'm at is I'm in a zone of diving into all of these classic sounds and then trying to reinterpret them to kind of make them a little more modern. So that recreation project with the Dark Ride was like, okay, that sound, but a little more modern. So a little less heavy, a little darker, maybe a little bit more wash to it, but still carrying that same essence. And now I'm just thinking about how that relates to like 5 or 6 other cymbals that are classic, the famous cymbal sounds that I want to go down that trail on, just to kind of explore every avenue and see, try to connect the dots on the whole history of cymbal making. And there's a lot there. I mean, it's just like music. You can just go down the rabbit hole infinitely. You'll never reach the bottom of it.
Yeah, for sure. And I love the idea that you're doing these reduxes, because it's not like, I don't think you could clone a cymbal exactly. I mean, there's just so many variables, but the idea of saying, well, we're going after a sound.
Yes. Yeah.
As opposed to like, oh, well, the profile is like this. Cause I think I remember when you were talking about the Sound Creation Dark Ride, you're talking about how there's like a lot of paradoxes in the design of that cymbal, right? It kind of has like a trough as it gets closer to the bell, which normally would have all these honks and hums. And then, but I guess the weight kind of balances it out or something, obviously you know way more about the construction than I do.
But that's it. It's all these factors that somehow kind of coalesce into a killer sound.
Yeah. It's actually, and one cymbal, because I have students and I teach a bunch of students, and there's a lot of the times we will go down kind of different drummers, and one cymbal sound that is very much related to that Sound Creation Dark Ride is Billy Higgins in the 80s, because he was playing just a regular 602, not a Dark Ride per se. And that's another one of those cymbals where on paper it should not work, but it does. And maybe it was just maybe he had 6 rivets in it or 8 rivets or something like that, or just the way he played it. By the way, one of my favorite cymbal sounds ever, which I kind of want you to make one, see if you can make one, is Billy toward the end of his life. He's playing on this Charles Lloyd record called The Water is Wide. I think that's the record.
Yeah.
And it's just beautiful. I think he's also playing on a Schofield record. I want to say Works for Me is I might have to put a note what the actual record is. But yeah, he's playing an old K. But it's just a beautiful sound,
You gotta revisit that record.
Yeah, it's just just really nice sounds. And that's the funny thing is when I'm teaching students and I'm listening with a more kind of critical ear, it's just interesting how you assume that like Elvin and Tony and Art Blakey, they were playing thin cymbals, but I'll listen to Elvin play and I'm like, that's gotta be a 2,300 gram 20. That's gotta be. I mean, it's just, when you listen to it and really just without any kind of preconceived notion of oh, a jazz cymbal is a thin cymbal, it's like, wow, they were actually playing heavy cymbals.
Yeah.
At the time.
It kind of makes, it highlights the fact that old Ks, I think now we kind of think when we hear the word old K or the term old K, we have a sound that comes to our mind about what that means. Old Ks are I would maybe say they're the most wildly varying type of cymbal because they were really heavy old Ks. And if you go even farther back to the Constantinoples, those were marching cymbals that were extremely thick and heavy.
Yeah.
If you look at the really early era jazz in 1910, 1920, because they couldn't make them thinner. So there's other people that know more about this, but the history of Zildjian, and I think Armand or Avidus was approached about making a thinner cymbal, and it was the first time that it had really ever been done. It was kind of 40s, 50s, thin in that for a ride cymbal. They obviously made little splashes and stuff that were thinner, but yeah, but old Ks, a lot of old Ks are heavy. I've got an old K, which I need to show you next time you're here. It's 2,200 grams for a 20. Real heavy, but I could totally see Elvin playing it. It'd be kind of cymbals, and I got it under the assumption that it was actually thinner than it was, and I was disappointed when I saw it's 19 and a half inches.
Oh, okay.
And it's 2,200 grams, and I was like, oh, bummer, I'll never use this. But as I've developed and grown, I'm like, I see the merit in it and the value in it.
For sure, yeah.
Being able to hear a old K that has more mass on it, it responds differently. It does a different thing that's just as valid of a musical. It's just as valid of a musical instrument as any of the, thin, dark, wobbly ones that we love so much.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's. So what do you what kind of cymbals are you playing now? So you're playing my cymbals. You've got some other ones, obviously, like the ones we all carry that we'll never get rid of. What cymbals are you playing right now that you especially dig?
So yeah, I have the 20 and a half flat. And then one that I acquired recently of yours is this one. It's a Labyrinth 22. That's 2,521 grams. And I love how you date cymbals. I just feel like that tells a story. And the date also, the engraving is here. I don't know if you were in just a funky mood that day, because normally I put them in the bell.
Yeah, I was in a different mood.
But you had sent me, and I actually told you that you should hold on to it because it's so special. The Craig Lauritsen Redux.
Yeah.
And I noticed, because you sent me both of them, and I noticed that it's the same date. You made both of these cymbals on the same date. So I'm curious, was this, so this is just a Labyrinth. Was this kind of also inspired buy like the Lorison, maybe like your own version of it,
I
or
think it was because that one has a hand formed bell, and the Lordson one is a pressed bell, modified pressed bell.
Mhm.
And I was making both of them at the same day, with the hand formed bell one being like kind of a low key inspiration, knowing that it would be different because it's the hand formed bells are just wildly different than press bells. And,
Yeah.
but yeah, I was making those two at the exact same day. Yeah. What's the
Yeah.
date on it?
So
The exact date on it?
March 12th, 2025.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. No, it's great. And yeah, I remember I was kind of going back and forth between them. And I remember, because I have OCD, so I'm just like, I can get so nitpicky about a cymbal. I'm just like, well, it's got that overtone if I play it right here, or it does this. And I'm just like, stop being picky and just how does it feel to play? That's one thing I'm really changing about my approach to this as I get older, because you know, this is actually just a kind of a funny. Well, let me finish the current
Yeah.
setup, and
Yeah.
so I have the 22-inch labyrinth, and then the 20 and a half inch half flat, and then I have this. Since I have my kit right here, this is a 20 and 3/16. I love how you wrote that. Prism flat, and I remember I asked you to make one kind of like the Bill Stewart, Dave King,
Yeah.
and knocked it out of the park, man. This is like my favorite flat ride I've ever played, and I've owned like 6 or 7 flat rides in my life. And so yeah, this one is great. I remember when I was at your shop and I hit it, I was like, that one.
Yep.
So yeah, no, this one is great. And then I have a set of over there 14 and a quarter labyrinth hats, which I don't know. I just like a slightly bigger 14.
Yeah.
That's just, I don't know, because I also have a pair of the only old Ks I own. I have a pair of 15-inch old Ks, and they're technically 14 and 3/4 or something.
Yeah.
They're like slightly undersized, but yeah, I kind of like just the funkier sized
Yeah.
hi-hats that aren't just like pristinely 14 or 15.
I from a maker standpoint, I'm always like, if I make a 14, I want it to have something of a pitch relationship. Like I want it to almost sound like it's a 15 because it's pitched a little lower, but
Yeah.
14, so it has a certain feel. And it's the same with rides. It's like a 20. If a 20 can kind of have a pitch that's sort of like almost a 22 somehow, and
Yeah.
22s could have like a pitch that's almost like a 20. It's like, because there's certain size cymbals do a certain thing better than anything else. But if you can kind of like incorporate elements, the good elements of a different size, if it can live within, I like a 20 that's like too high, like the pitch is just too high. Like if you get a lower pitch 20, so it almost is like giving you 21 or 22-inch fives. It's just, that's where like the magic is. And it's also impossible to do. It's like chasing that rabbit is like maybe creatively fulfilling and fun. But I think there's something practical about that. Like just like bending trying to bend the rules a little bit to kind of get more sounds out or aim at different and new sounds.
Yeah, 100%. And that's actually something I mentioned to you when you sent those hats, because yeah, I actually love the hi-hats the most. That's like my favorite cymbal, because I love using it in so many different ways. I use it as a comping device. Obviously we play it in a traditional with sticks, but I try to get like all these different sounds from like foot splashes and different kind of open sounds. And so yeah, I want that kind of unicorn hi-hat sound where I love the sound of a 15, but there's something about the response of a 14 where you can play all these intricate hi-hat patterns, and then the pitch sometimes, like, I've owned a few pairs of like old A's, and I just can't get into the higher pitch of it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I was like, man, you nailed it. It was like a unicorn project where you got this like 14 to have the response and feel of a 14, and the chick, which I really like, super defined chicks sounds, and then but having it sound like a bigger hi-hat. I mean, that was just like, and that's the thing. So now that I've gone through the whole setup, that's the thing I've kind kind of changed the most in recent years is because when I was younger, kind of coming off the modern drummer thing, I was fortunate enough to be endorsed by Sabian for, I'll say about 10 years.
Amazing.
And the way they did it was they just sent me, if I was interested in a cymbal, they just sent it to me. And I didn't get to pick or anything. The only rule was if I didn't like one, I could send it back and they'd send me something else.
Mm.
And, oddly enough, the first jazz ride they ever sent me was the one that became like my favorite cymbal, just by maybe coincidence, or maybe it was just a sound that I kind of grew into. But I just remember like, oh, I don't really have to be picky just because they just send me whatever. And I was, young. And then over the course of 10 years after that, after that relationship ended, I just got way too picky. And then I think during the pandemic, as just a pandemic thing, I just was constantly buying and selling and just trying to find like that sound. And then I realized you can never really get there just because, I do think that you grow into a sound. Sometimes you hit a cymbal and you're like, wow, that's it. And then maybe 5 years later, it may not be the right sound, or your tastes change, or, and yeah, there are drummers that I really admire that they're just like, no, I just have one cymbal and that's the one I always play. But for me, I'm always, as my playing evolves and as my tastes change and as I'm playing different situations and different kind of music, and also the music changes too. I mean, music today is different than what it was 20 years ago. And all of those require kind of different sounds and different approaches. And so now I just kind of go off of, when I play it, do I have a feeling? Like, does it speak to me in that way? Instead of just thinking about like, oh, it has this pitch, or does it wash out too much? Or now I'm just like, does it have a good vibe?
Yeah.
Okay, then cool.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I think about it now, because it's so easy just to get hyper analytical. I mean, I remember I was putting my ear up to it to be like, what's the fundamental pitch? And they have to be harmonious with each other. And I mean,
yeah.
I'm like going crazy, just, trying to find like, oh my gosh, these cymbals have to work perfectly together. And it's just like, but then I think, and I guess it just comes with wisdom and age and just, but that's the beauty of this instrument, is that they are unique and individual and imperfect. And that's, and it's almost like treating each one as its own thing.
Yeah.
And that's why, everyone will have probably a different opinion about what a single cymbal might be. What kind of reminds me of that is the famous Nefertiti ride. I promised myself I wouldn't bring it up, but because, that story is always told so much. But was it Paul Francis because he had it in his office?
Yeah.
And then he said, if you had come by the shop and you played it, you wouldn't think anything of it, or something like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's because of like the way that Tony played and the way that he approached the instrument, and that was a cymbal that spoke to him. And then, the way that he made music with it is probably different than maybe somebody else. And so, I think that's why it's really interesting that all these people are checking out the Al Foster ride.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure most people will play it and be like,
yeah, right.
maybe. But then when Al plays it, it's like amazing, know? And all those records I hear.
Like the player is more important than the instrument. Almost.
As the old saying goes, it's not the rod, it's the fisherman.
Yes. Yeah.
That's always funny too. And I'm sure that one thing I always love about when I get to hang with you in person and we're talking about cymbals is there's always this period where we just keep swapping, because as your listeners know, you are a great drummer in your own right. And so that's part of it too, is for me looking at a cymbal, for you to be able to play it and me to hear it from a little bit away. And then on the flip side, and then on the flip side, because you're so in tune with playing the instrument, and then you hear someone else play it, you can immediately go, oh, I see what I need to change and tweak. And I think that's what's the cool thing about the indie thing, is that almost all of these independent makers we're all drummers.
Yeah.
Like we all kind of know what the thing is.
Yeah.
And so when you're making an instrument, you'll know. One thing that Rick actually told me, which I think is really important, and for those of you that are listening out there, something to also consider more about, in some ways I even think more than sound, is the feel of it.
Mhm.
Because I've played cymbals that sound great, but just don't feel good to play. They might be too mushy, or they might have, like, where you want to play on the cymbal, maybe there's a hum.
Yeah.
Because some cymbals will hum, but only if you play it in a certain spot.
Yeah.
And so, is it where you play on the cymbal? Because, my favorite, the cymbal I've had the longest, there's a nasty hum, but it's like kind of like at the 230 position. So you never play on it because you never play up there. But but all those things matter in the overall spectrum of a cymbal sound, is not only just what the metal is, but how you play it and where you play it, what sticks you use.
Yeah.
That's what's really interesting about the new Labyrinth that I have, the 22, is when I play it, I use an MJC4.
Mhm.
And when I play it with that stick, it has a certain sound. But then I also have the Rick Dior stick, which is basically like a Diet Bolero. It's a Diet Bolero. And that is like scarily close to a Brian Blade sound.
Wow, cool.
And it almost makes me want to switch back to Rick's stick.
Yeah,
I'm just like, I can get the Brian Blade sound, from that. But gosh, how much that impacts the sound too is what kind of stick you use. I mean, it's just,
which
it's
also,
so.
If you ever go to, when you go to New York and if you get to play that Al Foster, I found out from a guy who was really good friends with Al, like he would kind of whittle a stick down almost to like a point. And that he used that kind of stick on that. And so then I went and like sanded down some wooden tips and play it on this dark rod that's sitting over here. And it's like, whoa, okay, now I'm starting to see even more so how this kind of super heavy cymbal with this kind of tip is getting you that kind of sound that Al had that works so well in the music that he played.
Yeah.
So it's deep, very deep.
Yeah. It's almost like that reminds me when you have a pair of sticks that's kind of gone too far and the tip ultimately just chips, and then you have that kind of raw area, and then you play it and then you rotate the stick and then it has a different sound.
Yes.
And then sometimes I'm like, oh, I kind of want that sound.
Yeah.
Because it's a little bit of a darker. I'm sure everyone that's listening knows this feeling when they get that pair of sticks that chips and then you play it on the chip and it's like, oh wow, this is way darker and a little bit more mellow sounding, and it's almost like I want that sound. So that makes total sense that he would like whittle them down into something that's more dark. That's interesting.
It takes out the clanginess, the kind of shrillness that weight produces, and it's just like playing on a super chipped up, really soft wood stick tip. So it's awesome.
Yeah, because that's essentially what the tip does as you play. Like for those of us that notice the tip shape changes, I always thought when I was younger that like some of the wood gets left off on the cymbal, but no, it's actually just compressing. That's what it's doing. Yeah. And so whittling it down is kind of like simulating that compressed sound. I don't know, it's interesting. So, and then that's what I've come, in my kind of more middle age, here is just kind of really appreciating and being more open just to the individuality of all of it, and really just hearing instruments for what they are, and just I think I remember you mentioning another fellow Timothy Roberts cymbal artist, Yaska, who said he wants cymbals that are intentionally kind of harder to play. I think he said that, or I think you said
exactly
that. Yeah, and it's just like I kind of dig that because it forces you to almost think about different musical decisions. I'm also just a funny side story. I'm also a bass player, And I was listening to an interview with Michael League, who is the bass
Yeah.
player for Snarky Puppy, who's actually a friend of mine because we went to UNT together way back in the day. But he told the story about why he switched from like a boutique high-end bass to a Fender P bass. And it's because his boutique high-end bass, like the battery ran out right before a gig, and he borrowed, of all people, Tim LaFave's P bass. And he said that the fact that the P bass was a chunkier, like higher action, not as easy to get around, it forced him to make different musical decisions,
Wow.
i.e., play less notes, play simpler. And then at the end of the gig, he said, "That's it. That's the sound I need to have."
Wow.
And I was like, wow, it's so cool how the instrument can almost lead you into not being into this almost autopilot of just like, well, yeah, it's I know all the things that I have and I could just play whatever. But when the instrument challenges you to think about it in a different way,
Oh,
it's like
cool.
that's where the magic happens. And sadly, Al's not with us anymore, but I wonder if maybe that's why some of those drummers gravitated toward those kind of cymbals, was it just made them play different.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, Paul Motion, for example, it's like he was so sparse. And the way
Yeah.
he would play, and even like he almost like inverted the whole typical jazz thing of like darker cymbals, higher tuned drums. He like inverted it, like bright, loud
Yeah.
cymbals, low drums. And then the way he would just like, it's like he hit a note and just let like an hour pass before he hit something else. It was like he was like
Yeah.
allowing the music to weave through all of it. It's like a stronger statement kind of cymbal that doesn't have all this wash and lush whatever. It just kind of like he could make those statements, but it would be like too obnoxious probably if he was just blazing on that kind of cymbal constantly,
Mm-hmm.
like this barrage of like intense sound. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I love what you just said. I'm like, because that feels like it takes what Yasko was saying about that difficult cymbals to play. It almost takes it to the next level, or fleshes out the idea even more as to why. Why would you want something that's intentionally hard to play? Well, like you said, it forces you to think outside of yourself and maybe make a different musical choice that you wouldn't normally make. And then all of a sudden you're discovering a new capacity you had to make music you didn't think you could make. Because we're so locked into what we practice, and we can go to the gig and pull out what we practice. But as jazz musicians and as improvisers, the goal is to play something you've never played before.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And to be in the moment and to really respond to what is happening. And yeah, that the idea that you could respond what's happening because some people are just not concerned with gear, and that's totally fine. Some people are just like, I'm not really into gear, I just kind of play what I play. But then like people like myself and a bunch of my friends were like super into gear. Like I love geeking out. I mean, and that's kind of how our relationship started, was we were just geek out all the time about all these things. But I think the knowing about the gear and knowing why things are the way they are, it's because it's in service of the music. It's in service of why is the sound the way that it is.
Yeah.
And yeah, sometimes I think it's so fascinating to see it kind of happening in real time, is your reduxes of some of these cymbals, are almost kind of explaining how these anomalies changed how we approach the music and how we approach playing the instrument. It's probably I think the video got posted today, but you did a video on, I still need to watch it, I just saw the thumbnail.
Yeah.
But about the session hats.
Yeah.
And of course we all know that's because Dad put the bottom on the top. And something as simple as that, can totally change how something feels, how something plays, how it sounds. And I used to be the kind of drummer, just because it's probably the OCD, but I was so nitpicky about like, oh, I got to have my own drums on the gig and they got to be tuned exactly the way I want. And sometimes if I'm, maybe I don't get a chance to tune a house kit or something, maybe there's traffic or something. And, I obviously make it in time for the gig, but I can't like spend the time to tweak every single little thing. And then I just get on the gig and like the bass drum's super low on a jazz gig. And I'm like, oh, well, make it work, And I always find, especially with jazz, that like if you want to play like your bebop super notey, kind of licks, that obviously bebop is tuned in such a way, super high drums. The language of the music relates to how the drums are tuned. You try to play all your crazy Philly Joe stuff on a rock, it doesn't work, right? Because the drums don't respond that way. And that's why when I listen to cats like Brian Blade and, I think Brian's like the best example.
Yeah.
But yeah, Paul Motion, Jack DeJohnette, that play more sparse and have a lot of space. And then you listen to how the drums are tuned. It's like, oh yeah, they're lower.
Yeah.
Because when the drums are tuned lower, a low bass drum isn't going to get all those notes out. So you have to be more careful with your choices. And yeah, the cymbals do the exact same thing.
Yep.
And
the length of the sound does not like physically allow for more notes to happen in a shorter span of time. It's like you would be running over yourself. The sustain and the notes would be running over. It'd be just a jarbled mess. So it's like forces more space out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's something as I get older, it's funny kind of just going back to the modern drummer thing. When I watch it now, because that was 25 years ago at this point. And it's crazy to see. It feels like, it was a whole lifetime ago. But when I watch it, I could just hear the youth in it, and I could hear like, oh yeah, I'm playing all these notes, and it's like
you really like Weckl.
Oh, I loved Weckl. Oh my gosh, he was my number one influence.
Yep. I can tell. I never asked you that before, but I did. Yeah.
Yep, he was my number one influence, and I grew up on all those records. And this is kind of weird. I know that when I say it, it sounds weird, but I was like transcribing that stuff when I was like 8 years old, but I didn't know what transcribing was. I was just playing along to it so much that I just started copping all the stuff.
Yeah.
And this is a funny story. Not too many people know this story, but when I was around 7 or 8 years old, my dad filmed me playing along to Weckl's stuff and sent it to him. And he wrote us back. He wrote like a nice letter.
Whoa.
and he gave me a signed poster. And I still have it somewhere. But it was just like, that was my main influence. And he's still, when I listen to him even today, I listened, it's funny, this morning I listened to Chick Corea Electric Band. And I was just like, yeah, man, that was all the stuff. But then, as I got older and just was exposed just to more things and more approaches, I got to study with Ed Soth at North Texas, who him and Rick both single-handedly changed my approach to the instrument. And I will give all the credit where it is due. Ed completely changed my playing. And from day one, he was like, okay, you can do all the notes. That's totally cool. But you need to at least know the other perspective so that you can make the most musically appropriate decision that you can make in any given time. And now it's funny. If by some chance, Ed, you're listening, thank you. I will thank you for the rest of my life. But now it's funny because when I play and I try to go for something notey and I know it's not musically appropriate, my body rejects it. My body's just like, nope, you're not going to do it. So in many ways, it's like, it's like my subconscious now knows just like always just have the music at the forefront and just make, I'm in my teaching studio right now, but I have a little wisdom board behind me. And the very first thing says, have a musical reason for everything you play. And that was something that Ed really instilled in me. So yeah, that's part of the evolution of the sound in my playing over the years, is just always approaching every situation just with like, how can I be the most musical, make everyone else sound good, especially in, and we've definitely had talks about this, especially in a world of social media where it seems like the gimmicks is what makes, what kind of makes all the traction, and the most flashy thing is what people latch onto. I think really the opposite perspective. I think we're kind of hopefully getting to that point again, which is always just thinking about making other people sound good and serving the music and playing with the most musically appropriate thing at any given point. And and it's funny because some of our heroes that we all talk about, like Jack DeJohnette and Al Foster and Brian Blade, and even people beyond quote unquote jazz drummers, like Carter McLean is one of my favorite drummers, Nate Smith, all these guys, they're always serving the music, they're always serving the song, they're always just playing the right thing at the right moment. And it's like, yeah, we know all those cats can shred.
Yeah.
But it's one thing to see them live too, because it's always like the 30 seconds of the flash that make it onto the internet. But what you don't hear is that just groove for a few hours, So those are always the things that I'm thinking about. And also what I'm trying to teach my students too, is, as much as we are influenced by kind of the algorithm, is just always remembering what we're actually here to do, and that's to serve the music and to make people sound great.
It to me seems kind of like the emphasis on trying to make it like a ground up approach versus like top down approach of the top being that flashy 30 seconds. And so all the young drummers, it seems a lot of young drummers just kind of look at that, and everything they practice is about that pinnacle, that peak of the mountain, to try to get those chops together. It's like if you have a ground up approach, it's like, that stuff at the tip top is fine, but it's like if you go to a mountain, the air is thinner up there. You can't stay there forever. You got to get off the mountain. You got to go down into the valley where all the life is, and that's where the stuff is. And then you have your mountaintop moments. But getting I don't feel like I'm really qualified for this, but I did a clinic at my alma mater, App State, and because I knew probably a lot of the drummers in that room had way more chops than me. But so I intentionally just kind of focused on what I feel is important and what got me gigs when I was playing, which was like, can you play quiet? Can you play to the room that you're in? And I was like, okay, this room that we're in is really boomy and loud. So like this volume of me, playing at this level is actually like triple forte, but I'm like here, like I'm barely hitting the cymbal, barely activating everything, and it's triple forte. If I go into a different room that's super dry, I can dig in more. It's like you have to know these things. Like these are fundamental, foundational things that you then build on, but those are the things that get you called back.
For sure, yeah.
I've been called before other drummers way better than me. And I've been told explicitly, like, I was going to call such and such, but I called you because I know you can play to a room.
And
it's like
100%. Yeah. It's really, I mean, the more, like the older I get, the more I realize just how selfless it really is, like how selfless and active playing music. And, I think it's natural. I really like that analogy, that kind of top down versus ground up, because we tend to think of like the tip of the iceberg, and something I'm really into just from a personal standpoint is like mindfulness, and that I think you mentioned it before, when you were making your first cymbals, there is a term for that. It's called beginner's mind, because you don't have any expectations going in, you don't have any outcome that you're trying to it's like it has to be a certain way. And as soon as you do that, you kind of are blind, you put the blinders on to every other possibility. So one of my favorite books, not to get too like heady about it, but one of my favorite books is called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And it says, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the experts, there are few. And every time I play now, I think about that quote, because what's funny is that a lot of drummers will chase that, like the flashy thing. But sometimes when I approach it from that ground up perspective, like you said, and I just try to let it happen without any expectations, I find that those moments come, those like kind of flashier moments, not only do they come more naturally, but they always come in the most appropriate time. When you know that that's what the music needs at that moment in time. Because that was one question I always had when I was like kind of re-evaluating my approach was, well, I watch some drummers and they just shred. Eric Harlan, like one of my favorite drummers, modern drummers, he could just play so many drums, but he always does it at the most appropriate time. And every time I watch him play, I'm just like, man, it's just always, it's never out of place. It never distracts me from what's going on. And he actually said, funny story is when I was doing my doctorate at the University of Colorado in Boulder, he came with Ben Wendell's Seasons Band to do a guest artist thing. They were playing at Dazzle that night. And I will always remember that as the most important, enlightening masterclass I've ever seen, because it was not technical at all. Like, people weren't asking like, well, how do you play over tunes, or how do you learn tunes, or people were like, I think the question that sparked it was, what do you do when you feel like you don't want to play, or like you feel like you're bad at playing, or you just feel like nothing's clicking? And I was like, wow, and I was like, man, we're asking this to Eric Harlan, Gilad Hexelman, Aaron Parks, Ben Wendell, like Matt Brewer. I was like, wow, this is gonna be
good. Yeah.
This is gonna be really good. And Eric talked about the idea of being invisible, which I thought was really fascinating, because it was essentially like, I'm playing from a standpoint where I'm not trying to take any attention away from what's happening. So like being invisible, or like not necessarily noticed, and not in a way where it's like, oh, I don't notice you're there. It's more of like, what you're doing is not distracting or taking away from what's happening. And like that was so insightful to me at that moment, because I was just like, like that's when you're approaching the music from that selfless perspective. It is that kind of like invisibility. And I will always remember that. I also remember he played my cymbals that day, and I had, because I know that he plays some dry complexes, I had the dry complex thin, and I remember him going, "Ooh, you got a good one." I remember him saying that.
Like,
and I was like, it's like mine, my precious.
Yeah.
But yeah, hearing him play, because he was so just because this is a cymbal thing. Hearing him play that cymbal, I was like, I will never figure out how to play the cymbal, because he knew how to play it.
Wow.
And I remember him, like, hearing him knowing how to get the sounds that he could get out of that instrument. I was like, that's because you play those. But that was, that was definitely, and I have a recording of that masterclass. I need to like clean it up, because it's like a phone under a chair, but I'll send it to you. I mean, it's cool.
To hear it. Honestly,
it's
cool. It made me think when you said that thing about it being invisible. It's like we talk a lot about like finding your own voice or your personality on the instrument. It's like a lot of people are introverts, and then people are extroverts, and it's like that idea of invisibility. It's like not a lot of people are comfortable being like center of attention or highlighted, and so like an introvert playing music, it's like that would almost be like a comfortable space to kind of lock into being invisible and just a member that's serving the music. But then you obviously want to have your moments where you're pushed and stretched, and so you're put out front as the, it's your moment on the mountaintop. It had me thinking about that, like because I've never liked soloing, ever, just period, ever.
Me either, actually.
I hate it, and I think I'm legitimately not very good at it at all. But I'm very uncomfortable with those moments because there's so much like pressure. It feels like there's so much pressure to like make a statement that impresses people, or does so. It gives people that like, because the drum solo is kind of the best solo always. Kind of. I mean, maybe that's a hot take. But it's usually the last solo. It's usually like the whole solo section. It culminates with that bombastic thing. Always can't stand it, but because it feels like there's a lot of pressure. But whenever I've been able to kind of turn my mind off and be more just like allow whatever to happen, respond to the instrument in front of me, let it kind of dictate what I'm able to play on it and how I feel, and just kind of be there, then like you're saying, like the stuff will come out that might be like more intricate and involved, and it fits, and it actually is like it's right for that moment. But it's like you're not trying to force it. Man, that's a hard lesson. I feel like that's like one of the hardest musical lessons to learn, is like, what does it mean to actually feel your feelings and actually let that drive what musical statements you make, and be like present and aware to that. And it's kind of hard to teach. I mean, you're a professor, so like,
Yeah.
how do you teach that? Do you teach that? Like, what?
Well, yeah, no, I talk a lot about psychology when I teach, because I mean, it really is. It's a very mental game that you play when you're, like our inner monologue, as we're playing, like, and I'm guilty of it too. I'll start taking a solo and I'm like, wow, this is really lame, or like play something better. And I do think there is a psychology of, especially when we're younger, because we always feel like we have to like prove ourselves when we're playing, especially in the jazz world. A lot of the times you play gigs with people that you just meet. Like I did that the other week. I played, a few members of the band I hadn't met before. And, when you're younger, there's always that, especially like if you move to a city and you're trying to establish yourself, you always have this thought in the back of your mind, like, oh, I gotta prove that I'm good. I gotta prove that, that I'm capable. And so what happens is sometimes we approach the music from this perspective of, well, let me play all the hip stuff.
Yeah.
To show. But then what happens is you're approaching it from this inauthentic perspective. And that's why I said earlier that like now when I like my body kind of catches me, because I know it's not the most appropriate thing in the moment. And it's interesting just to hear everyone, I talk about this a lot in analyzing players with my students, and not just drummers, but also horn players and other instrumentalists, where you look at somebody's like the beginning of their career, and they do kind of approach it from that kind of like, let me play a bunch of notes perspective. And then as they get older, you notice that they don't play as many notes. And it's because maybe there's, and again, this is all opinion, and I'm sure there's a lot of different reasons why somebody might choose to not play as many notes, or not play, or really serve the music. But as people get older, they're probably already established and they don't have anything to prove. And so they could go into any situation and not feel like they have to play something incredibly complex or intellectual, because everyone knows, oh yeah, well, that person's, good and capable. So what I try to tell my students is, can you get to that point now?
Yeah.
It's really hard to do. It's really hard to do. And it's also hard to go on a gig with people you've never played with before. And it's funny, I've actually, not as like an experiment, but I've gone into gigs just being like, let me just play as simply as possible tonight. Maybe, maybe I'm just feeling a little under the weather, or I'm a little tired. And it's funny, all of those gigs, people are like, oh man, you sound so beautiful. And I'm just like, yeah, okay, because it's because people, I think people can tell when you're like trying to force it.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I work with a lot of high school students, and people that are just like, they're getting to the point where they're figuring it out. And you could tell that they're approaching it from that perspective, like, oh, I learned this cool new lick, let me try to play it, and then and it's and the only reason that I don't have a negative response to that, because I was like, I was there before.
Yeah.
I've been
and you
there.
don't want to squash it either.
Yeah, it's like I can hear the youth in it. I can hear, I could hear where you're in that process. And I think that's another thing is, younger players, they think, now everyone's different, but at least from my perspective, younger players, when they think like, oh, they mess up in front of an elder or something, or they're like, oh, I tried to play this thing and I sounded really bad. The elders can tell. It's just like, yeah, we know you're in process, you're figuring it out, you're you're learning, and it's in those mistakes, it's in those experiences where you figure out, oh yeah, that's not the best thing to play, in any situation. Sometimes it's like you don't get called back, and then you figure out like, oh, why didn't I get called back? Maybe I played too loud, or maybe I played too many notes, or maybe I didn't learn the music as well as I needed to, or any of those kind of situations.
Yeah.
But, what I look for, especially, in my students is like, do you have that awareness to
Mm,
say, okay, yeah, I know why that maybe isn't the most appropriate thing, or, oh, I know when it is, when I can turn it on and when I can turn it off,
right.
because that was questions I had for my teachers. Is just like, well, yeah, I'm not trying to play with as many notes right now, but then I watch this person play and they're playing a lot of notes. Why does that happen? And then it's more about, is it the right moment or not?
Mm, yeah.
So yeah, it's really and that's something I'm really interested in now is all the psychology of it all, because many people, and I still catch myself as you're playing with other people, you're in that monologue, like, oh, where can I do this thing, or like, oh,
Yeah.
should I play this at this moment? And it's always the times where I just take a step back and just say, let it happen. You know, it's like that's what the practice room is for. Like the practice room is to get all of these things together.
Yeah.
And I always work on more technically complex things in the practice room, not so that I can bring them into the gig. It's so that I can allow myself just to be in the moment on the gig and trust that
Yeah.
whatever. That's the one thing that I hear in most students is there's always a disconnect between what you hear in your head and what you can play with your hands.
Yeah. Right.
It's
You're in the practice room, you're building the headroom.
That's the word I use. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It's kind of like the analogy I use is like, say you have a drag strip and there's a smart car and a Porsche. And it's like they're both going to be able to hit 60 miles an hour, but that Porsche is going to do it way faster and way more efficiently
Yeah.
than a little tiny smart car. And so that's the headroom is I'm trying to build headroom so that when I get on the gig, I can just kind of let it go
Yeah.
and be myself and just let the music totally happen and trust that I've done the work and it'll happen. So yeah, I always see whenever I'm teaching students, I always try to assess the way I think about it. And I totally stole this from Ed, by the way, is that every student has a padlock like above their head, and you are like the janitor and you have all the keys, and you got to find out which key unlocks that padlock for them. Sometimes, most of the time, you got to make a new key. That's most of the time.
Wow.
But I always find that some students, they have a lot of technical knowledge. They have a lot of chops. They have a lot of coordination, but they don't have the musical intellect sometimes, right? They don't know when to play certain things or what to play in certain situations. But then I have students that are the opposite, where they have all of this music in their head and they just can't do it technically. They can't execute it. So it's my job to kind of figure out where's the imbalance. And then, so yeah, that's what Ed was for me. He recognized he has so much, Michael has so much technical facility, and all we worked on was music, like what to play in certain situations. And then it's funny, I had peers, I'd be like, oh, so what are you working on in lessons? He's like, oh man, we're doing all technique right now, all coordination. And I'm like, oh wow, I'm doing absolutely none of that with Ed.
Yeah.
Because he was so brilliant at being able to see where the imbalance was. And it's, so that's why I thank Ed every day, man, because he really just taught me so much about music and about teaching and about approaching the instrument. And, and that's the mark of why Ed was so great as a teacher, is because none of his students ever sounded like him. It's cool.
Oh, interesting.
It's so cool because, I mean, like Jim Riley, Dave Weckl, Ari Honig, Keith Carlock. I mean, Ross Peterson is one of my, one of my peers. Even some of the more recent grads from UNT, like Matt Young and Nolan Bird. Some of these cats, like we all sound totally different. And that's the cool part about it, is because Ed really just tapped into us instead of just being like, oh, you got to play a certain way.
Yeah, this is how you do it. Yeah.
That's what I loved about studying with him. And yeah, every time I just hear him talk about music, I'm just like inspired
Yeah.
because he just has that approach.
Yeah. I had
And that's why he's one of the best.
Yeah. I had one lesson with him about 15 years ago, and it kicked my butt, and it was awesome. And I was like,
Yeah.
I kind of had a story in my head knowing how he can be tough, like, so I was like, all right, I want to go get my butt kicked by Ed Soph. And so it was at the Jamie Abersol Jazz Camp.
Oh yeah.
They probably don't do those anymore, but
no, they don't, unfortunately.
Man. Yeah, this was like 20, I guess 20, maybe 2011 or 2012.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was like one of those things. I nervously walked up to him at the lunch break and was like, "Mr. Soph, can I have a few minutes of your time to get a lesson?" He's like, "Sure, whatever."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had that very he was very aware of like the teacher student boundary, and because he wanted just to make sure that his students were serious, and they weren't going to take advantage of that relationship. And yeah, I remember the first lesson I ever had with him. We had just come off the beginning of semester lab band auditions, and I remember again this idea of like trying to prove yourself. And I was a freshman at UNT, and it's like, oh, North Texas, it's a big jazz school. And I was like, okay, the last round of drummer auditions, you play with the actual bands. And I remember I was assigned to play with the 1 o'clock, and I was like, oh man, here we go. Here's my chance. And I'm like ready for it. And I remember we were playing a funk chart, and there was this little section that just said Big Phil. And I remember like my inner monologue was like, oh, there it is. There's my one shot. I'm going to impress everybody. I had a little bit of a hothead when I was there, but at least until my first lesson with Ed. Yeah. And I remember I just played this crazy outlandish fill that just kind of just came out of nowhere. And I remember Ed gave me his comment sheet, and he was writing something about my hi-hat, I think. And the pen went. When I played that fill, he goes, what the hell was that? Like, he wrote it on the sheet. So my first lesson with Ed was him just berating me for like why that fill wasn't appropriate for. I was like, oh boy, what did I get myself into? And I was like, that's what this is gonna. Okay. But he knew that's exactly what I needed. And and come to find out, him and Rick Dior were really good friends. And
nice.
So he knew like Rick's teaching. So Rick really got all of my technical coordination facility together. And then Ed was able to take that and just completely, make me a well-rounded musician. And so I think, those experiences, just having that really technical background at first, and then approaching things from a musical perspective, that's my core philosophy. How I teach is this balance between technical and musical, and really having them serve each other. And it's all about the music. It's all about serving the musical song, the song, the style, and that's how I've been able to, kind of go in between all of these different situations in my career, playing straight ahead jazz, but also, I had a side life for a while as a classical percussionist, and that was my first degree. And, I did all of that, and then playing rock gigs and hip hop gigs and all those things, learning other instruments and stuff. I would have never imagined. A good friend of mine, Ryan Saranich, who's a multi-instrumentalist, I got the chance to sub with this group called Brit Floyd, which was a Pink Floyd tribute show. I would have never in my wildest dreams been like, oh, I'm playing a Pink Floyd thing. But, again, just from just all those core, like ground, like foundational mechanics.
Yeah.
That's what preps you for all of these experiences and how you can kind of function in any musical situation if you approach it from the right place.
Right. And I was going to say, whenever I hear you play, there is, you can just tell a lot of times people will be either a technician. This is a terrible way of saying it, but a technician or an artist. They're either like really esoteric and unique, or they're super technical and they can do everything. And I've felt like hearing you play is like hearing someone who's found this beautiful intersection of artistry and technicality, technical prowess, kind of like blended into one. So you listen, and it's not. And so I would encourage anyone listening to like check out some videos of Michael playing. Like there's this, I can't put a finger on what it is, what kind of player you are, because it's like I can't really lock it down and define it as one or the other. It's like it's this wonderful blend of both, which makes it a joy to, and also obviously makes it like an honor for me, for you to be playing my instruments. It's like, yeah, I feel extremely honored. So.
Oh man, that means a lot. I really appreciate you saying that. Because it's been, I guess to hear that the philosophy that I have about it is coming out. Yeah, I really appreciate that, man. And yeah, it is an honor to play these instruments. And I think that's what's so beautiful about kind of this particular moment in the industry, is that it's like, man, I'm really good friends with the person making the instruments that I play. That's cool. So cool.
That's cool.
To know the person, and especially like knowing that some of these instruments were like, well, yeah, I had you in mind when I was making it. And yeah, like being able to understand, and I'm sure that you find this with all of your artists, is they all have different sensibilities and they all have different approaches. So that probably goes into the crafting of the instrument.
Yeah,
that is so cool. And that's something that we hadn't experienced yet with all the mass manufacturers just chunking them out, and even the old Ks, from what I understand, they were just people in a I guess a factory or a foundry, just chunking out cymbals, and just people found the ones that they liked. But now we're at this point where you're making cymbals not only for specific sounds, but yeah, when you get either an artist or even just anybody, and I know that you don't just approach this just for your artists, you approach this for anyone that approaches you with a commission. Is you try to get inside of like, well, what's the sound they're hearing and what's their vibe, and how
what's our terminology that might not really link up? Like when they say dark, what do they mean by that? Not just what I think. So there's
exactly
like an interpreting kind of process that has to happen, which usually involves a back and forth and videos and recording examples and all these things. And I find that fun. It's very in depth, but it's fun to do that, because it's like I do learn something new every time talking to someone, regardless of who it is. It could be a beginning drummer, or it could be someone like yourself, a professional. Like I'll always learn something, because I'm hearing a different perspective. And so it's like always kind of hipping me to something that I probably didn't know, or it's at least, it might reinforce something that I maybe thought to be true. It's like, okay, yeah, they're hearing that too. Okay, there's something there to hold on to, Which that is the exciting thing about this time, is that we can kind of fetishize the old K cymbals. I think we live in an era right now that people will look back on in the future and go, whoa, what a cool era that was, because we're making them just like they were made in the old K factory, except we're all drummers and we all have like trained ears. So it's like, it's better. Okay, sorry, I shouldn't say that.
No, I totally get it. Yeah,
it is. It's like if a cymbal smith is actually a musician, they know what they're going after. It's not such a crapshoot as to like, are you going to find a musical instrument? Like, it's going to be musical because there was intent in the making of it.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that is one of the most compelling. Yeah, you're right. It's one of the most compelling things about this time, because, and I think you even said, I think I have the card here, your Timothy Roberts card that ships with every order, is like, you play test these cymbals. Like, you just don't make them and then just put them in a pile. It's like you take them on gigs, you make sure you tweak them if they need to. I think the one thing that most drummers always, even if they're not incredibly hip to the construction of a cymbal, they'll always notice like, oh, there's a funky hum or a funky overtone, and that's because, they're not playtesting these, from the big manufacturers. I think there's a standard that they're obviously making sure that the cymbal does what it needs to do. But you know, I don't think they have time. You know,
No.
it's just a like business 101 thing. It's just the output that they have to have. They just can't tweak every cymbal. They have the capability for sure, but they just can't
Can't.
do that because they have to
It
just
would be
chunk out so many
hundreds of
cymbals.
dollars more if they did with all of them. Like the cymbals would all be the price of the new K Karo and blurp out the the name. But
Yeah,
the cymbals, they would all be $1,200.
yeah.
Um,
We call them the Voldemort cymbals, right?
the
He must not be
Voldemort,
named.
the Voldemort cymbals. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, every cymbal is going to be smacked once in a factory, but I think playtest is a different thing. It's like
for sure.
I'm playing. Every cymbal gets played with like at least 3 different drumsticks. It gets played in at least 2 different rooms, if not 3 different rooms, to hear the way the different rooms translate the sound. It gets played with a kit on its own. Some get played on gigs. I wish I could play all of them on gigs.
Yeah.
But there is that is super enlightening because like I find those places, it's like, yeah, that part of it doesn't work or the feel is a little off. So it has to go back into the pile of stuff that needs to be reviewed and tweaked. And then other times it's like, oh, there's a funky hum there, but it's perfect because it's like not in the playing zone. It's kind of off upper quadrant, and it actually feeds the playing zone in a way that's super interesting. So it's like fixing it would make it a more boring cymbal. And then, it's like it's super cool in that way.
Yeah, and that totally makes sense. It's like having a perfect cymbal would actually probably not sound super inspiring to play.
No.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I dig about just the true handmade cymbal is that they're all totally different and they're all totally unique and no two are alike. And that's to be honest with you, before I signed on with you, I was using a manufacturer that is, let's just say, known for their consistency. And they're known for their just incredible, like you get 5 of them together and they all sound pretty much dead on. And I think that's great from a standpoint of like, what you're getting. But especially when we talk about jazz drummers, every jazz drummer has an individual sound and an individual identity. And I could just tell that when I hear drummers that all play the same cymbal, it all sounds the same. And I thought, wow, where's the individuality in that? That's a tough balance sometimes because it's like, yeah, there's that cymbal that we all know. And, at that point, I thought to myself, it's funny. I mean, I think this kind of is joked around in the indie cymbal community that there are a lot of drummers that endorse big manufacturers, but on the down low, they play other things.
Dude, if people knew what I know about that, it's
and the thing I realized is I don't want to keep that in the closet. Not at all. Like I want to be unapologetically like, these are Timothy Roberts cymbals. And that's what I use and that's my sound. And what's funny is we both had this experience a few months back where I played at a jazz festival and there was a drummer that came on after me and he ran up to the stage right after I played and he said, "What are those? What are those cymbals?" And I said, "Oh, they're made by Timothy Roberts." And we wound up hanging at a jam session later that night. And he goes, "Hey, what was the name of that cymbal guy that you mentioned?" And I gave him your website and contact info. And then you said, like a week later, he got in touch with you about making cymbals.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's why I don't want to keep this a secret. And especially my students, because so many of them are like, what kind of cymbals should I get? And I was like, man, you have like the wealth of options right now is so vast. And even the idea of modifying is, I had one student literally last week, like, "Oh, I love this cymbal, but it's just too heavy and has a hum." I'm like, send it to Tim. Get it modified, because if you like the cymbal and you just want a couple things changed about it, it's just like, man, that alone is just completely changing how we think about this because, you know, it's not, what's the best way to say it? Like these aren't totally like, it's not like they're set in stone. Like you can always tweak them and change them and modify them. And of course they change as they age too, which is also part of the fun.
Right.
Like my one cymbal I've had for almost 20 years sounds totally different now than it did
Yeah.
20 years ago. Yeah, one of my good friends in New York, Colin Stranahan, he has one cymbal that he's like, yeah, I didn't really dig it when I got it, but over like 5 years, it's just turned into this cymbal that I really love.
Yeah.
And so
Grow
that's
into,
all.
I'll remember that from this interview. Grow into that cymbal, like cymbals to grow into. I
Yeah.
want to unpack that. And I'm gonna figure out ways of even teaching that because I know what you mean by that, and I have a way of thinking about that that's different, but that's the way to say it. It's like, you almost, there's something to be said about it. If you hit a cymbal and you're instantly like, that's the one, the holy grail, it's happened, it's here, I got it. There's only one place to go from there, which is like down, like it's only going to be less impressive over time.
Mm-hmm.
If you feel like you have that kind of aha moment. Now, that's not to say that's always the case, but you want to like, I think it's a really good sign if you get a new cymbal and you go, huh, like that's almost your first take is like, huh, because it's like not what I thought, but maybe there's something in there. That's where you want to be. I think that's probably the best space to be in whenever you receive a new cymbal.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe it's not true. I don't know.
Oh, no. And of course the other variable is in that 5 years, that 10 years, your tastes are going to change and your playing evolves. It's not in a vacuum. And so, yeah, there are cymbals that it's funny. I look back and think, wow, I shouldn't have sold that one, or I should have, like, oh, why did should have kept that one. But then I think, well, Michael in 2025 is different than Michael in 2005. So maybe getting that cymbal, if I had that cymbal in my possession, maybe I'd play it and be like, it's not it.
Right.
Maybe, But yeah, I kind of like what you said about, like if you get a cymbal and you're like, that's it, that's the one. I think
that works if you have the experience. Like you said that about your flat. It's like you've owned 6 flats. And so when you came into my shop and you hit that flat, you went, that's the one.
Yeah.
It came from the wisdom of knowing I've had this many and I've gone through all of it. I've been looking for this sound. So it's not a perfect analogy. I like,
no, that makes sense though.
I like externally processing. It's like you at least want to know that when you hit it, that kind of like, it's like intrigue more. There's like a sense of mystery almost when you hit it. You're like, okay, potential. You want to feel like there's potential there, and jury's still out. You got to take it to your gigs. You got to do this. You got to do that before it'll really settle with you. Is like is this your sound?
Yeah, for sure. And maybe to the drumming world, we can think of, maybe we could reframe this conversation around finding the holy grail cymbal. Because I know that's what we all think about, is like we're trying to find that one. But I don't think about it that way anymore. Because like that one could be great in 1 year, and then 10 years your taste changed, and then it's suddenly not the one anymore. And I think maybe our heroes stuck with the same cymbal, maybe just because there wasn't that much available. They found what they liked and they maybe didn't find anything else. But if you look at some of our heroes, like Tony didn't play that Nefertiti ride his whole career. I mean, one, he destroyed it.
Yeah,
I mean, that thing got crazy. But yeah, he went to different brands, and Roy Haynes did the same thing, and Jack DeJohnette did the same thing. I mean, like, their tastes changed and they evolved, and as new cymbal technologies came out. And of course there is a little bit of a business marketing part of like, hey, we have a new product that we want you to use, and things like that. So I don't think about it anymore necessarily as this is the one and it's got to be perfect. I just think, can I collect all these sounds and find, maybe I go through a period where I like this one particular cymbal, and I have like 3 others that I really dig, but it's just this one right now feels really good. Or maybe you're playing a certain kind of music that lends itself to one particular sound. But then you might, take a detour, and then you might find another cymbal works really well for that genre or that.
Yeah.
And it's still your sound because you like it. I mean, that's the thing about individuality, is it's just like, I think individuality is just an amalgamation of your tastes and your influences.
Yeah.
So it's your cymbal taste is always going to be individual.
Mm-hmm.
It's always going to be what you like. But yeah, I'm kind of as I get older, I'm kind of on the camp now where you just have a bunch of different things
Mm-hmm.
and you find out what works, like I have that half flat, but I know you're also making me a new 20, and it's not because I want that 20 to replace the half flat. It's I want that sound as well. Like, people own a bunch of different snare drums because they want all those different sounds. It's not like there's any one snare drum that works totally for a certain situation.
Yeah.
And same with guitar players, they might have one kind of pickup that works for one genre of music, and then they have other, things. As a bass player, I own a bunch of different basses because they all function in different ways. And so it's like, as many times as we think we got to have that holy grail cymbal, I'm just like, I don't think about it like that anymore. I just think, oh, this cymbal is I almost think about it from the opposite perspective, is I have all these different cymbal sounds, and then I let the music choose, here's what I'm going to play on that particular gig, instead of like, oh, I have this cymbal, I want to use it as much as I can.
Yeah.
And that's what I really like about our relationship, is that, one thing that we talked about when we started this was, you want to build all these different sounds and have all of these different, you have your Reverie stuff that's kind of more like streamlined, but then you want the kind of the TR side of things to be more individual sounds and
Yes,
different kind of reduxes and all that, because again, it's just about what sound we're getting from the instrument. That's really,
and maybe this is probably a silly way of saying it, but maybe the Holy Grail is actually just you as the player. Maybe you're the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
And then everything else, your palette is just what helps you sound like you, but the purpose is you, or the goal is at least like actualizing in some sense and having the musical statements that you want to have. And so the cymbal could be like a step on your journey. It's like a little tool that helps you for a phase. Maybe you find one that you stick with for many, many years, but maybe you find one that you just use for 6 months, or you just use for a couple of years, then you turn around and sell it. The online used cymbal market is flowing constantly with new stuff, always going on the market, and things are moving hands. And old K enthusiasts talk about how no one ever really owns an old K. They just are the steward of it for a time until they move it on, pass it on to the next person. So I like looking at it. But
yeah, 100%.
Michael, this has been awesome. There's some really good moments in this. I'm looking forward to listening back to this, and looking forward to hearing
me too.
what you think. Michael D'Angelo, check him out. And we got some more stuff coming. And like you said, I'm making some cymbals for you, and we'll do some cool, funky projects. I'm sure we've talked about some other like cymbal design things that are kind of future. This is something I'm really excited to be diving into with these artists. It's like we talked about, helping me flesh out and really explore different avenues and get different perspectives of drummers that are truly world-class drummers are coming on board to help me, flesh this whole crazy thing out of making instruments and trying to, make the best sounding instruments I can make. So huge thanks to you, Michael. Thanks for your time. And
thank you.
Look forward to chatting soon.
Yeah, likewise.